I want you to meet our first speaker, an amazing story. Dick Miller is a Texan. You'll tell that by the end of his first sentence. You will realize, yep, he's a Texan. Dick inspires me for many reasons. A very successful administrator of healthcare systems that he worked at in Austin for many years, and yet in retirement from that, that just means I can go crazy working on things I want to work at. And he began a new business of consulting called Innovate, but what really is of interest to me is that he and his wife launched a project to drill for water in East Africa, Ethiopia primarily, for places where there were people who were dying because of waterborne infectious diseases. I like also for the fact that he didn't wait around for the overall denomination or some organization to do it, and then he just came along. He and his wife started it. And that entrepreneurial spirit is something that I hope will just shine through what he's doing, and I hope he gives you permission to go a little crazy for Jesus too. Dick also has become a friend of mine on the board of directors for Thrivent Financial, and before I bring Dick up here, we're going to only get to keep him for a few hours because Thrivent, after we had set this date, unfortunately decided to have their big regional gathering in Northern Illinois in Chicago this evening, and Dick has to go. We also have another member of the Thrivent board here today who's from Virginia, who's able to be with us briefly as well. And I just want you to meet another great guy. He's also on the board of directors of Valparaiso Lutheran University. Fred Kragel's in the back. Fred, could you stand up and just say hi to everybody? There he is. Give Fred a wave. Dick Miller has just been elected to replace Dr. Kurt Sensky as the chairman of the board of directors of Thrivent Financial, another great organization that has invested hundreds of millions of dollars in Lutheran ministries and in communities where Lutheran groups are investing themselves. Without further ado, I would like you to meet my friend and a great guy working for Jesus, Mr. Dick Miller.
You know, I'm going to go through a little bit of the history of Water to Thrive, and I got to thinking about it after I looked at the presentation. It's really the first time that I've kind of sat back and thought through what has happened over the last 5 years. And as we talk about the presentation and the materials that I'm going to show you and the items that I'm going to talk about, it might sound really planned, but you know, the honest answer is 6 years ago, I had no idea I would be standing here speaking about this. So this was totally unplanned in my life and came about as a result of, you know, the hand of the Spirit working on me and a bunch of other people to make this happen. So I just wanted to have that as an introduction because I think it's important for everybody to understand that, you know, God puts doors in front of us all the time. And it's up to us to kind of turn the knob and find out what's on the other side. And this has been a real blessing for me and my family. So, okay. It helps if you turn it on, Dick. No, it doesn't help. I don't think this is going to work. What am I doing wrong?
I'll take a look at it and see.
While she's doing that, we'll do it the good old-fashioned manual way. So first thing, we consider ourselves to be an enabling ministry to bring fresh, clean, sustainable water for rural communities in East Africa primarily. And we think about ourselves as a catalyst for other people to engage in this process and to be able to express the abundance that occurs in their life. We're faith-based, and as you'll hear in a moment, our roots are in the Lutheran faith. But you know, at the end of the day, we work with all who have a heart to help, all denominations, all people who are concerned about others who don't have clean water. So we make no judgment about that. So let's talk a little bit about our beginnings. Summer of 2007, a good friend of mine in my home congregation, Triumphant Love Lutheran Church in North Austin, ran a 6-week Sunday school, adult Sunday school class in the summer, August, around world hunger and poverty. And he brought in maybe 20 or 25 speakers, Caritas, Meals on Wheels and more, the Food Bank, a whole bunch of organizations that dealt with hunger and poverty. One of the speakers that came to speak to us was brand new in the field of international development, worked at an organization in Austin called Glimmer of Hope, and they did work in Ethiopia around water projects. And he had actually been in that role only a week, but came and spoke to us about it, and he left the next day, literally, to go to Ethiopia for his first time. And then returned about 2 weeks later to the Sunday school class and brought some pictures back and talked to us more about what he had seen firsthand. It touched several of us, and we felt like, well, this is an easy problem to solve, and we just couldn't imagine not dealing with clean water, not having it in our life. And so we thought, well, our congregation, we can find a way to do 2 or 3 wells. We put together some matching dollars, a handful of us in the class, to encourage other members in the class to give to do some water projects. That turned into 6 projects within 3 weeks. Our congregation found out about it. 4 months later, we had done 12. And that was the Spirit working on our congregation, and through that, inspiring several of us to then take that idea. And our thought process was, if this can happen in our congregation, if we just educate people about it and inform them about how simple it is to solve this problem, we can transform lots of lives. And so that was really the spark for Water to Thrive in order to get us underway. And the Spirit does great things in terms of connecting the dots for us, right? As I said, that event and that set of circumstances wasn't planned in my life, but a whole series of things kind of fell in place. The class and the subject, being able to bring Eric Smithhauser there to present the issue of clean water, to talk about the need and the impact on the women and children who don't have clean water, how we can respond, the simplicity of the solution, the passion of the people who were trying to help the people in Ethiopia, and my good friend who ran the Sunday school class who kind of encouraged this along. And then it became obvious to me that as an entrepreneur, I could use my skills to be able to help launch something that might have a bigger, greater impact. And so that's really how we got underway. A few words about kind of my perspective at this moment in time. I had made a recent career decision. Pastor Jeske mentioned that I'd been the CEO of a foundation for healthcare and had decided, well, one of the things that as people know me, I'm impatient, and my half-life in a job is about 5 or 6 years, and I'd been in that one about 6 years, and so felt like it was time for me to do something else, and this became an opportunity for me to do that. And the history, I'm a technology entrepreneur, have run a number of companies, have been a person in a venture capital firm, a partner in a venture capital firm to help entrepreneurs start up businesses. So I'm a risk taker, I don't mind opening that door to find out what's on the other side. Most of the time it has been incredibly successful for me, and I've been totally blessed by that. Sometimes it doesn't work. I love the startup mentality, but I dislike bureaucracy, indecision, and lack of creativity. I want it to move fast and to make our own path, to find the opportunities in front of us and act about them. I think the other thing that built into, and I'll talk a little bit more about our model, that built into the decision to do this is, historically in my career, I'd had lots of involvement with nonprofits. I was chair of the Austin Area United Way for about 4 years, and so the United Way is actively involved with lots of nonprofits serving the community. And at St. David's Community Foundation, we gave away annually about $20 million a year to nonprofits. And to some extent, I had some angst over what I felt like were some issues around the typical nonprofit model. And for me, it was more about efficiency and transparency and really directly connecting the donors to their gift and the people benefiting from the gift so that they know exactly where their money is going. And personally, I feel like most nonprofits don't do a very good job of doing that. And so as we thought about how we were going to go about this, that's some of the stuff we tried to address. I think also in the mix is what I would call the changing attitudes about philanthropy. The coming generations involved in philanthropy do want direct connection to the people that they're helping. They do want to know where their money is going specifically. They do want to see transparency in all elements of your business model. Social media, in terms of being able to communicate with people and engage people inexpensively, big impact on our decision. And improved communications, and then leveraging local passion. As we'll talk about more about our model, we really depend upon advocates and ambassadors in congregations, schools, universities, who become passionate about the issue of water and then help us with developing and raising money for the projects. So here's 5 things that I would say characterize our engagement model, both with our donors and our beneficiaries, and we kind of sit in the middle of that. First of all, I really strongly believe in this direct model, directly connecting the community being helped with the organization or the donor or the sponsor of the project. When a congregation or a school gives us money for a water well, they know exactly the community, and we give them the GPS coordinates so they can go on Google Earth and find it. In fact, we have it on our website for them. So they know how many people they're helping, they know the name of the village, they know physically where it's located in Ethiopia or Uganda or Tanzania. So they have a direct connection to that community. We try to be efficient. We have studiously avoided building staff. Up until a month ago, we've never had more than 2 employees. And we've been able to accomplish all we've have been able to do by leveraging the resources of other people. If somebody does something well, it's the last thing I want to do is to reinvent what they're trying to do. We try to take advantage of that. So for example, when we implement the projects in these remote countries, we vet very carefully the people we work with, but we don't try to replicate what they do well. They do the implementation in interaction with the community because they know the culture, they know the communities, that sort of thing, and we don't try to replicate that in any form or fashions. We don't have to spend any money on it. Transparency. We make a 100% promise. And what I mean by that is that if you give me money for a water project, 100% of that goes to the field. It goes to the water. So a typical water project for us costs $5,000. Congregation raises $5,000. We don't take a penny to run the nonprofit. We in fact have 2 bank accounts. One for operations, one for water projects. And when you give money to water, even if it's $10, it's dedicated to water. We raise money for what I call non-restricted purposes to run the operations, but we do that transparently. We have a group of people, wonderful people, called water angels. Now, why would you think they would be called water angels, right? They help us with operating budgets. They give $1,000 or more per year to enable our mission to connect with more people. And then we run all kinds of events. We have a big chef's table event coming up at the end of this month. That's a big fundraiser for us. We run a 5K race. We sell merchandise. a number of things like that. We do some events, some concert events. Those items are specifically designated to our supporters and sponsors as activities that will be used to support our mission. And then the final thing is sustainable. We take the 20-year view. My comment is always, the easiest thing to do in the world is to drill a hole and hit water because you know it's there. The hardest thing to do is to make sure it's operating 20 years later. So we have a governance structure that I'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes that works with the community to ensure that they take ownership of the project and make sure that it's maintained and sustainable for the community. So that's a quick summary of kind of what we do and a little bit of what's different. So how did all this get started? How did we get from that Sunday school class to where we are now? In the early days, this is the list that I thought, as I thought about this process, of what was important. First of all, we got together and did a plan. You know, it wasn't a real detailed business plan that when I was in the venture capital business that I would have funded, but it was at least a plan. It had a budget and had some ideas about how to go about raising some initial capital to get started with it and that sort of thing. So we did have a plan. Really finding the right people that could help us make connections and who were passionate about the issue of water. Every one of my board members makes trips on their own expense to publicize what we do. And they're passionate about the issue and they're passionate about helping people that need clean water. Finding the right partners, back to this issue of not trying to replicate expense. We were blessed by the fact that we had this partner called Glimmer of Hope, where that original speaker came from, who had resources in Ethiopia. So guess what? We piggybacked on that, let them manage our projects. They didn't charge us anything to do that. And they were our implementing manager in the country and worked with the NGOs in Ethiopia to implement our projects. We go there twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, to do the quality assurance and the vetting of the partners. But in terms of the day-to-day management, we piggybacked on what was already there and their resources. So that partner was incredibly important to us. I think this next one about simple but transforming is really important. You know, there's nothing more fundamental in our life than water. We can't live spiritually or physically without it, and everybody gets it. The moment you think about having to deal with not having water or making economic progress without water, it's easy for people to relate to that issue and connect to it. And, you know, to some extent, this uniqueness of approach around the connectivity, the accountability, and being able to make the 100% promise really helped us get launched and underway. And then the final thing, we did apply for a grant. We applied through Thrivent and got a small startup grant to help us get started to create some DVDs and brochures and documents and some of that kind of stuff to get underway in terms of our implementation. So all of those things came together. But at the end of the day, it was all about, you know, you don't know where this is going and you got to make that step to really get launched and get underway, the leap of faith, open the door and start down the process. So we actually wound up getting our 501c3 in April of 2008. So this month, we're 5 years old. So now I'm going to talk a few minutes about the water crisis and kind of what motivated us through this process. There's 1 billion people in the world today that don't have access to clean, safe, sustainable water. 1 billion people. That's 1 in 7. So I don't know, there's 200 people in here. If you look around you at a table that might have 6 or 7, one of you wouldn't have clean water today. Wouldn't have it the rest of your life, maybe. The communities that we serve, in their history, they've never had access to clean, safe, sustainable water. About half of that number is located in the mid-continent region of Africa. If you kind of go 300 miles each side of the equator, the bulk of the people in that area live without clean water every day. In Ethiopia specifically, there's roughly 80 million people. 65 million of them live in rural circumstances with no clean water. This wouldn't mean anything to you, but being from Texas, Ethiopia physically is twice the size of Texas, with almost 3 times the number of population. So it is a really big country with a lot of people that don't have water. And as Mark mentioned earlier, the devastating effects of not having clean water on health, child mortality, education. Young girls are, because they have to walk 4 to 6 hours every day, they don't get to go to school. They carry water with their mother. And so we work to solve that problem. So we're connecting communities in need, specific communities, with donors and sponsors with a heart to help. And here's just kind of a list of the people that we engage. Anybody who walks up and says, oh, I'm really interested in this, bingo. We try to connect, we try to get them involved, and try to figure out if there's a path that they can help us create a project in their life. So churches, Sunday schools of all ages, youth groups, Christian schools and universities. Anybody associated with a Lutheran university in the audience? In the last month, the presidents of LECNA, the Lutheran Educational Conference of North America, came together as a group and gave a gift of a water well as an example to their students, because we're now trying to engage all the Lutheran universities, 42 of them or so, in their service learning groups to each raise money for a well each year. So that's just connecting the dots for us. Civic organizations, public schools, private donors, and memorial wells or honorariums. Those are all examples of the way we have been able to connect with people. So quickly, a little bit about the need. And many of you may already know this. Here's specific pictures that I took. I always use this picture because it was on my first trip. And that's water that I wouldn't put my hand in, let alone drink it, or take it back to my granddaughter. Really dirty, filthy water, but it's the only water they have. And so that's what they use, and they use the yellow jerry cans to carry it. When that's full of water, it weighs 45 pounds. And they're walking 4 to 6 hours every day of their life, not 1 day a week, not 3 days a week, every day of their life gathering water. And the burden lies primarily on women and young girls. You can see some examples of 2 middle-aged women, a grandmother up in the upper right, and a little girl 6 years old. All ages are affected with the women. They're all involved in it. So a typical community that we work with, 400 to 700 beneficiaries, rural and very isolated often, no roads, no electricity, no sanitation, no running safe water. And the women and children are typically walking 4 to 6 hours every day. So what do? We work with our partners in the field to implement water projects. Our history, for less than $10 per person we help, we have brought clean water to them. My favorite example, sometimes I have a Starbucks cup, but 2 large lattes cost about $10, depending on what part of the country you're in. For that, you can provide a rural East African water for 20 years. Amazing investment. We use experienced, reliable partners that have very low overhead in our budgets with them. We only allow them to take 5% of what we provide for the project for their overhead. 95% has to go to the project. And I want to talk a little bit about the sustainability. Water committees, water sanitation training, and a maintenance fund. That's the sustainability part of the equation. Because without that, within a year, the project wouldn't be working. The water committee is the governance, and we insist that every project have a water committee, half women. It might be the first time the women have had any leadership in the community, but they carry the water. And so if anybody in the community is going to make sure that it stays working, it's the women. And water, sanitation, and hygiene. If you've lived your whole life culturally without clean water, you don't know how to deal with it. You don't know how to keep it safe. You don't know how to bring it into your home and protect it and keep it from being contaminated. So every family that benefits from the well goes through water, sanitation, and hygiene training. And then the final thing, the water committee sets up a maintenance fund. It may be the first time anybody in that community has ever opened a bank account. But they collect a small stipend from every using family, and they build a maintenance fund so that when something does happen to it, they've got some money to fix it. And those three things make sure that the project is sustainable and will last a long time for the community. Just some examples of a hand-dug well, and when we say hand-dug, they're hand-dug, right? You know, picks and shovels and buckets and ropes and pulleys. Pretty crude, but they're very creative and they get it done. Then we do spring protection system, and the reason I included this one, anybody know what Makani Jesus is? Some people bound to know that. That's the largest the second largest Lutheran population, Lutheran organization in LWF. 5.5 million Lutherans live in Ethiopia. 5.5 million Lutherans live in Ethiopia, and the church in that country is growing at close to 20% a year. Pretty amazing. We work with them. They're one of our implementing partners now. They didn't start with us, but we have, over the 5-year period, we've done about 50 projects with them. And then we do deep boreholes where we can't do hand-dug wells. So there's no greater joy than being with a community the first time they enjoy clean water. Really, it is the greatest moment of our work. And great celebrations. The people are incredibly grateful. And this was one of our projects. There must have been 125 jerry cans lined up to get clean water that first day. Really, really touching moments. This is another celebration with the water committee. That's Alametu. She was 6. First time she'd splashed clean water in her face. But what does it do for the community? It reduces child mortality, restores the health, restores dignity, and breaks the cycle of poverty. It allows the women to help their husbands. It allows the husbands to stay healthy to work in the field. It allows the children to go back to school. So it's been a blessed journey. 5 years, over 300 projects funded, clean water for over 150,000 people, over 250 congregations engaged in sponsorships of water projects. We're operating now in Ethiopia, Tanzania, Uganda, and Sierra Leone, and that 5-year period, about $2.3 million of contributions have come for the benefit of water. So I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present.